Good morning, everybody. Welcome to class this morning on what is the final live stream. And this live stream will be a short live stream this morning. Thank you for watching. Thank you for joining me. It'll be a very short live stream. This is the next to last week of class, the last week being our final week of class. I hope you found value in these live streams over the course of the semester. I hope you've gotten at least a little something out of them. That's the purpose of them, to give you something that's just a little bit unique, something that is just for this class in terms of education, in terms of learning something. And I hope you've gotten something out of them, right? Because, that's kind of the point of all of this. And so your final exams and your final projects are due by noon on the last day of class, which is coming up, right? It's the end of next week. You'll get a lot of reminders on that as we get closer to time. And so all of next week will basically be dedicated to that. So there won't be any live streams or anything like that next week, even though I will be available to you via Teams, via email. If you have questions, if you need anything answered. But I did want to do just a brief final exam review today. I wanted to just talk about the final exam for just a few minutes. Talk about the format of the final exam. And then just cover like a handful of questions. I don't really want to cover that many questions that are going to be on the final exam, because you've seen most of the questions that are on the final exam. Maybe not all of them, right? Because things are kind of randomized. Things are in and out. Some of the questions that you see some of your other classmates haven't seen, and vice versa. So you might see some questions on the final exam that you've seen before, and some questions that'll be new to you, but all the material has been covered. So we'll just talk briefly about kind of how the final exam is laid out. We'll cover a handful of questions, no guarantees that they will be on your version of the final exam, but something similar to it very well maybe. I think a bigger thing is to just kind of have a good understanding of some of the through lines that we kind of took on throughout the course, and then for some of the more specific things, obviously, and we'll mention this again, right, it's a final exam that you have 2 weeks to take. Like, you have time to go look things up, right? But about the final exam, it is a 100 question final exam, which is a pretty big, long final exam, right? But again, you have 2 weeks to take the final exam, this week and next week. So if you want to, you can take it once this week, take it again next week. If you don't like the score, I'll go ahead and grade it this week. If you want to know what you made, I'll go ahead and grade the first one just to see if you are satisfied with that grade or not, and then you can take it again. But there are just two attempts that you have for this final exam. The questions are pulled from all of the previous module tests. Again, since those tests are kind of randomized a little bit, there are more questions in the pools for those exams than what you see. Some of those questions you'll have seen before, others you will not have. So, your previous module tests are a good study resource for some of the things, but it won't quite cover everything. It is also randomized, so your 100 questions, again, won't be the same. If you take it twice, you won't get the same 100 questions. You'll get 2 different sets of 100 questions. You might get some overlap. There is a small possibility that you'll get the same set of 100 questions, but that's highly, highly unlikely. And again, you get 2 attempts at this. So remembering some of the same through lines that we talked about throughout the entirety of the course. Things like, customer satisfaction, the idea of customer service being that we want, 100% customer satisfaction 100% of the time. The idea of this sort of customer-centered support, where we put our client at the center of any computer training and support that we do. We're going to understand our clients. We're going to understand their needs. We're going to give the user support. We're supporting a person more than we're supporting technology, right? Because that technology belongs to a person, and that person needs that technology for a certain activity, for a certain event that is important to them, whether it is work or whether it is personal, right? Another through line that we've talked about throughout the entire semester is the idea of efficiency and effectiveness. What makes things efficient? What makes things effective? Another through line that we've talked about throughout the entire semester is the idea of gaps, all the different gaps that we've talked about, and how we bridge these different gaps. The things that take us from where we are to where we want to be. Various other things, right? And we talked about a lot of these things throughout the various live streams from the semester. And so if we look at some sample questions, right, we can look at some things like this one: incompatible components that are unable to operate together in the same system result in which type of hardware problem, right? You might remember this from, one of the earlier modules. We were talking about hardware problems, software problems. And this, of course, is a hardware installation problem, right? If we have components that are unable to operate together in the same system, it's an installation issue. When hardware component settings are incorrect for a specific operating environment, well, that is a configuration problem, right? So that's the difference between configuration and installation, right? We're looking at settings here, these component settings, versus simply components being unable to operate together in a particular environment. Right, if we go on with these ideas here, when we look at the smallest amount of hardware problem tickets, these are actual hardware malfunctions. Right, and this was something that we talked about a lot when we were talking about these issues earlier on in the semester, right? These hardware-software issues. Now, hardware malfunctions actually account for the smallest amount of hardware problem tickets. Because actual hardware malfunctions, actual hardware failures, are actually pretty rare. But another thing that we talked about was how we can reduce these hardware malfunctions. And we said one of the things that we can do to reduce these hardware malfunctions is that we can use burn-in tests to reduce these hardware malfunctions. We can basically turn them on, let them run, kind of put them under stress. And as we put them under stress, we can see what kind of happens to them. And, if they fail pretty quickly, then we know that there's something wrong there. There's some kind of manufacturer defect there, to where it's not meeting its requisite thing there. But when we do this burn-in test, we need to do it for a long period of time, right? So we're going to do this burn-in test for a decent period of time just to make sure everything works. Right, so how long does a burn-in test typically last? Well, 0 to 12 hours, that's not enough time to really tell if anything's going to happen. Neither is 12 to 24. Really, neither is 24 to 48. We really kind of want to get a 48 to 72 hour burn-in test in there. putting these hardware components under stress to make sure that everything is going to be okay. Now, of these 4 components here, our CPU, our RAM, our hard drive, and our solid state drive, one of these 4 components is going to be more likely to fail compared to the other 3. So which of the following components would be most likely to fail? Well, that's going to be the hard drive. Now, why is that? Well, that's simply because the hard drive in particular is a mechanical component, right? There are moving parts in a regular old hard drive, right? Our CPU, our RAM, and our solid state drive, these are all silicon-based chipboards. No mechanical components, nothing moving on those. When you get mechanical components, things that are moving around, you also get friction. And when you introduce friction into the situation, you introduce more problems. So of these 4, the one that's most likely to fail, well, that's going to be your hard drive every single time. Let's talk about software problems just for a few minutes here. Which of the following software problems occurs when software conflicts happen? Software installation problems, software bugs, software configuration problems, or software performance problems? Well, when you have software conflicts, that means you have one piece of software installed that's going to prevent the installation of another piece of software. So that's going to be a software installation problem. Version numbering. In the version number 2.14, what does the number 2 represent? Well, that is the version number itself. Remember when we're dealing with this, as we kind of go with numbers, we have the version number, the update number, and the bug fix number here. 2 would be the version number, 1 would be the update number, and 4 would be the bug fix number in this case. Now, we have a certain set of industry-wide protocols followed by hardware and software vendors, and we call them what? Well, we know what burn-in standards are. We just talked about those. Device standardization, that's, I mean, what really is that? Hardware, software protocols, what are those? Plug-and-play standards, that sounds like something. Yeah, so these are plug-and-play standards. If you remember way back, we talked about plug-and-play standards as being, you know, kind of the thing that brought about a bit of a revolution in the computing industry. There was a time when a lot of hardware components were specialized for the system that they were going into, right? And that included peripherals, things like, you know, the mouse and the keyboard. And we decided that was kind of ridiculous, so we decided to come up with these plug-and-play standards, and we decided to universalize connections. So we got with this idea for the USB and these universal drivers and such. And so these are these plug-and-play standards, and they're not formalized, right? There's no governing body that oversees the plug-and-play standards. They're all just these sort of mutually agreed-upon protocols. Because really, they just make everybody's lives easier, right? Like, they're going to save us money. They're going to make our lives easier. They're going to make it easier for us to get into the industry if we follow these protocols. Let's talk about mission statements, right? You'll remember back in our management module, we talked about mission statements. We said mission statements establish expectations for groups of individuals. Who do these mission statements establish expectations for? Well, they establish expectations for everybody, the employees, the clients, and the management of an organization. Talked about the idea of an Erlang, how we calculate an Erlang. An Erlang is the determining factor of how we staff a help desk. This was something that we talked about during our management chapter as well. And we got this basic idea of, help desk staffing. And our Erlang is calculated by the number of tickets multiplied by the length of time waiting. Gets us an Erlang. Also, in our management module, we talked about our budget and what our budget should serve to support. And essentially, there we kind of made things easy, right? We started out with the foundation of our mission statement, and our mission statement sort of served as the foundation of essentially everything. And so everything would kind of go back to that mission statement, because that mission statement built the foundation for expectations of, clients, management, and staff. And in order to meet the expectations of client, management, and staff, that's how we made our staffing decisions. That's how we made our management decisions. That's how we made our budgetary decisions, because everything had to support that mission statement so that we were meeting our goals, right? So, essentially when we were talking about that management module, everything sort of went back to that mission statement as being at the core of how we make decisions as a help desk manager. Let's do just a couple more here, maybe 2 or 3 more, and then we'll go ahead and wrap up for today. Again, just because you're going to see a bunch of questions, and there's no guarantee that any of the questions that we'll kind of cover, unless we went over like 300 questions, there's no guarantee that any question that we'll cover will be on your exam. We will cover, it's kind of pointless for us to cover many questions. We'll just do a handful of them. So let's just do a couple more. Who is responsible for the ongoing growth of a help desk professional? The individual, the company, and the individual. It just happens, or nobody. And ideally, this should be both the company and the individual, right? And this was something that we talked about in the management module as well. Right? Essentially, you as the employee should want to get better. Right? Should want to grow. If you don't want to grow, there might be an issue there personally that you might want to work out. Right? But your company should also want you to grow. And if your company doesn't want you to grow, there's an issue there as well. And you might want to look for a company that does want you to grow. But your company should want you to grow because your company has a vested interest in your growth, because your company should want the best employees possible. Right? And I think that's one of the good things about this course, is that this course not only teaches you how to be a good help desk employee and the kind of things that you should expect when you go into the help desk industry, but it also kind of teaches you what to avoid. Right? Like if I'm just entering a company that just kind of treats me like a cog in a machine, it would probably behoove me to find my next step as quickly as possible so I can move on to the next one. So what should you do prior to writing a position description to recruit new help desk agents? This is an easy one. You should analyze the KSAs. What should they know? What are the knowledge, skills, and abilities here? What are the knows? What should they know? What should they be able to do? And what are the abilities they should be able to have? Last one here. We'll do this as the last one because this one should be easy. because we've already answered this one. What is the number one managerial concern? We said everything emanated from this. It's the mission statement. The number one managerial concern is the mission statement. Everything comes out of the mission statement. Your goals are set by the mission statement. Everything comes out of the mission statement. Everything emanates from the mission statement. The mission statement is the biggest concern. So that's where we'll stop. Best of luck on the final exam. Best of luck in pulling your final project together. If you have any questions, please let me know. You've got until the last day of class to pull all this. You got until noon on the last day of class to pull all this together. I'll be sending out reminders in Blackboard. Frequently until that time comes. That's all that I have for you for today. Thank you for watching live streams all semester, and thank you for watching this video today. That's all that I have for you for now. I'll see you when I see you. Thank you.